thought I'd show you some more CDs I've found in charity shops recently. This is an interesting one. This was on the Windham Hill label, and it's William Ackerman Passage. In fact, William Ackerman founded the label. It consists of several guitar instrumentals, which are kind of pleasing and soothing, but they're not as engrossing as some of his influences, such as Robbie Basho and Leo Kottke. Guesting on this, you've got other people from Windham Hill, which makes it interesting. So there's George Winston on piano and Darol Anger on violin. And interestingly enough, with that, I also got this one, which includes Darol Anger as well, with Mike Marshall. This is called Chiaroscuro. Also £1, also Windham Hill. And this one's much better. Marshall plays chimes, classical guitar, steel guitar, mandolin, and synth, and Anger plays cello, more mandolin, violin, more synth. But there's something really nice about this. It's a bit like the Penguin Cafe Orchestra in that blend of jazz, classical, new age. Not a million miles away from that was this one by Gavin Bryars called Vita Nova on the ECM label. This was actually $1.99, which is more than you usually pay for a CD these days. This was an interesting one. The Art of Noise and Daft. It overlaps with their first album, Who's Afraid of the Art of Noise, so I think it's a compilation. It's got some tracks from that and some other material. Love, there's a song called Love, which is actually a version of Moments in Love, which was one of the better known songs. That you get that 3 times, and it's a kind of early example of sampling with synth and rhythm experiments. It's a bit dancey, it's a bit soundtracky. There's a lot of variety there, and it's very playful. It's enjoyable, and you also get the benefit of the sleeve notes from Paul Morley, which were kind of turning the Art of Noise into a higher concept than a group. There's a lot of kind of myth he built up there, so that's an intriguing one. Christian Marclay, this is also very intriguing. It's probably even more playful than the Art of Noise. He's a so-called turntablist, and he adapts and samples vinyl records by Strauss, Chopin, Jimi Hendrix, Jane Birkin, and he takes the sounds and cuts them up, scratches them, manipulates them, messes with the pitch, if you're familiar with the source material, it's particularly interesting to hear sometimes amusing as well, to hear what he does with it. Here's one you wouldn't often find in a charity shop, a Beatles album, so With the Beatles. That was £1. It has got a slightly bootleggy look about it, which I think it's genuine, but something in the way it's been printed, particularly in the booklet, looks a bit amateurish. But I'm hoping it's a real one. Weather Report live in Tokyo. So that's done as a kind of vinyl replica sleeve. I like that as a format, but obviously it doesn't stack well with your other CDs. It's slightly bigger. But I'm looking forward to playing that one. I also found 5 CDs by Warren Zevon.
The first one was Stand in the Fire. That's a live album released in 1980 and recorded in 1980 at the Roxy Theatre in Los Angeles. Then there was The Wind, which was his 12th and final album, released in 2003. just before his death, just a couple of weeks before he died in September. Learning to Flinch is a live acoustic album released in 1993, recorded the year before, and some great stuff on it, like Werewolves of London, Stripped Down. My Ride's Here, who's his 11th album from 2002. He released several months before he realised he was sick, but he did call it a meditation on death. And then Transverse City was his 7th album, and that included Dave Gilmour and Neil Young on guitar.
As well as the Warren Zevon CDs, there were a couple of other things I got in the same shop. This was the Pogues, If I Should Fall from Grace of God, and that's from 1988. That was the album that included Fairy Tale of New York with Kirsty MacColl, which was obviously now ubiquitous at Christmas time. And this was interesting. This is the original soundtrack to Into the Woods, the musical by Stephen Sondheim. So I think this is from about 1987. It's the cast recording with Bernadette Peters. It's done in it's only one disc, but it's done in one of these double boxes because the booklet is absolutely huge and very detailed. And then finally, just some interesting compilations. So this was Firehouse Revolution, King Tubby's Productions in the Digital Era, 1985 to 1989. I don't know if you can see that, but a lot of interesting stuff on this. Well worth a listen. Probably owned by the same person was this one. Pay It All Back Volume 5, also £1, and this is an On You Sound compilation, so you get people like Mark Stewart, Bim Sherman, Dub Syndicate, Gary Clayle, and African Head Charge, and really interesting kind of sound that very much of its time, I think. And then finally, this is a Don Letts compilation, so it's called Social Classics Volume 2, Dread meets Punk Rockers Uptown, selected by DJ Don Letts, the soundtrack to London's legendary Roxy Club, December 76 to April 77. Quite a long title, but yeah, very interesting stuff, with sleeve notes by Don Letts, and on there you get King Tubby, Big Youth, the Congos, loads of really interesting kind of dub and reggae tracks, Augustus Pablo, Culture, Junior Mervyn. Highly recommended. That one was £1.50. So that's what I have recently been finding in charity shops.